Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today, we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. So overall this week, we had a lot of volatility due to the reports from Trump's tweets, right? There was a lot of movement because of that, but more than anything, what would define this week was the trade deal, or I should say partial trade deal with China. As you guys have known, and even with these videos, I stopped reporting kind of, well, maybe there's a deal, maybe not there's a deal, maybe there's a deal. You know, the back and forth with Venezuela and with Brexit and the trade deal with China, because at the end of the day, it just goes back and forth. Well, this week, the two largest economies, United States and China, have reached, quote unquote, supposedly a partial deal. And it supposedly means, includes intellectual property theft, currency matters, agricultural purchases, all kinds of things. So supposedly there is an agreement, or a partial agreement, I should say. Overall for the week, the U.S. markets, the Dow is up 0.91%, the S&P 500 is up 0.61%, the NASDAQ is up 0.94%. International market news, European markets are mostly higher. The DAX was the biggest winner in Europe at 4.15%. The Latin American markets were mixed. The biggest winner was the Santiago Index in Chile, in the deep south of South America, 1.92%. And the Mexican exchange was down 0.47%. That was the biggest loser. Africa and Middle Eastern markets, South Africa is up 2.86%. Saudi Arabia, the biggest loser, 2.94%. And in the Far East, Asia and Australia, the biggest winner, mostly higher, all of the markets out there in the Far East. The SEC market in China was up 2.38%. And for all of my Filipino traders now watching, the Philippine market was up 1.88%. Overall, in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news, not a lot of news this week other than the fact that the Libra, the digital currency or the cryptocurrency, whatever you guys want to call it, from Facebook, is now in a lot of trouble due to the fact that last week, if you guys remember, I reported that Facebook pulled out. Now other very big partners like Visa and MasterCard pulled out, even Stripe. Stripe is a payment processor like PayPal. And so now, because of the backlash from EU, the European and the United States regulators, it's up in the air what's going to happen next, because they had all these people that were on board. It was going to be great, and now it's not so great because all of these people are not on board. So Bitcoin also is slightly higher for the week, up 2.26%. It ended at 8,338.36 cents. In financial and banking news, the European Commission says that the European Union needs to have a preemptive fiscal stimulus. It's saying that cash-rich countries like Germany and the Netherlands need to inject more money into the European economy to be able to have a far longer period of growth. Somebody else should always pay for it, right? I think this is really funny. The countries that are financially responsible, the Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, Germany, they're the ones that should obviously pay for the ones that are not financially responsible, like Greece and Spain and Italy and all the rest. I just find that really funny. U.S. federal budget deficit for 2019 is estimated to be at $984 billion, or about 4.7% of GDP, the highest since 2012. The deficit, which has grown every year since 2015, is $205 billion higher than it was in 2018. It's a jump of 26%. Now, remember that I've talked about not only the federal debt, but the corporate debt and the personal debt, which have reached record highs, municipal debt as well. And obviously higher debt, higher levels of debt, or a higher level of increase in the debt is extremely dangerous, because that affects the borrowing costs over time. It increases them. So essentially, down the road, the amount of money that the U.S. government is going to borrow is going to literally be just to pay for the interest on the debt, not even for Social Security and infrastructure and everything else that we need. So it's a big problem long term. The Federal Reserve is also trying to increase the levels of cap reserves to reduce stress in the overnight lending market. They're going to start buying $200 billion of treasury bills. So essentially, the central bank in the United States is just going to create money, and then they're just going to go and buy their own debt. So imagine you guys are up over your heels in debt, and you just create some money, and then you just go and get it's like paying Peter to pay Paul, except they're paying Peter and Michael and Joseph and Michael and Tom and then somebody else just to go back and pay. You know what I mean? This is just like a vicious circle. And before they call it quantitative easing, this is essentially QE4, but they're not calling it quantitative easing. You know, they're not actually doing the same thing as before, even though they are doing the same thing as before. They're saying that they're going to finish these purchases by the end of 2020. By that time, I think they'll probably expand it because the economy won't be doing that well. In commodities, crude is higher this week. The U.S. crude is up 3.58%. It reached $54.70. International crude is called Brent. It's up 3.54%. It reached $60.51. And the China new trade deal is putting buying pressure on crude as well. China added 100 tons of gold to its reserves since resuming buying in December. It's one of the major official accumulators of central banks globally continue to stock up. So in the news, right, even Goldman Sachs, for example, is saying, no, gold is just a relic. Even Warren Buffett says it. But ironically, why are all the central governments buying it if it's just a relic? Remember, I always try to teach you guys don't pay attention to what people say, pay attention to what they do. And if the biggest governments in the world are buying gold, especially somebody like China and Russia that are trying to position themselves against the U.S. or even on line with the U.S., there's a reason why they're buying gold. So keep that in mind. Overall, the People's Bank of China picked up more gold last month. Gold for the week is down 1% at just over 1,480-ish. Silver is flat for the week at $17.61. In political news, President Trump has vowed to block the U.S. the House of Representatives impeachment inquiry. It's a tongue twister. Democratic congressional leaders on Thursday plotted the next move in the probes. And obviously this is in regards to the president's dealings with Ukraine as a political stalemate escalates with electoral, all these fancy government words, with electoral primaries just a few months away. So, if you guys don't know what's going on, essentially the Democrats are saying that Trump did something illegal, just like before with the stuff with Russia, which they found nothing. Again, this is more of the same. Again, I don't want to get political on this program, so it doesn't matter if you're left, right, center. It doesn't matter if you love or hate Obama. It doesn't matter if you love or hate Trump or Bush or whoever. I just want to report the actual facts. At the end of the day, they don't really have any facts yet. So just to kind of make sure you guys understand that there's three houses of Congress, right? There's the executive branch, which is the president. There's a House of Representatives, and then there's a Senate. So right now, Trump, or the Republicans, control, right, the presidency, the executive, essentially these two branches, the House of Representatives, the Senate and the presidency. Right? The third one is controlled by the Democrats, which is continually trying to go after Trump. So they can launch an inquiry all they want. They can actually launch this investigation and everything. But once it gets to the Senate, it's going to be denied because the Republicans are controlling it. So it's literally just a giant waste of everybody's time. And essentially what they're trying to do is dismerit Trump because obviously they want to take back the presidency and hopefully the Senate here with the 2020 election. So we'll see what happens. There was, in economic news, there was a $1,000 increase in median U.S. income during the entire 8 years of the Obama administration, which was 2009 to 2017. And during just the first 3 years of President Trump, there's been an increase of $5,000. So a 5-time increase just in the first 3 years compared to the total 8 years of Obama. Germany and Europe's largest economy is now teetering toward a recession. Factory orders went down by 6.7% year over year in August, due obviously to the U.S. and China trade war. There's been a slowdown in the entire Eurozone, obviously because of the domestic economic problems. Last week, the PMI and the ISM, which are manufacturing reports, showed that global manufacturing is shrinking and hitting markets and equities has not been hit just yet. So one of the things you have to know about these more, let's say, developed economies like the US and Europe, the majority of the economies is literally consumers. So people going out and buying things. So The reason why governments, especially after 2009, launched quantitative easing, which is literally just getting money and injecting it into the stock market, is because the majority of the wealth and more of these developed nations, let's say, is with stocks. Everybody has a pension fund or a 401k or an IRA. So if the stock market goes up and everybody sees their accounts going up, then you're going to feel more rich. If you feel more rich, you go out and spend more. If you go out and spend more, it moves the economy more, especially in the US, since up to now 70% of the economy is literally consumers. So imagine that, right? They just have to make it seem like, you have to make it feel like you have money to go out and spend money, even though it's on debt, the majority right now, right? The majority of the reason that the stock market has been going up all these years is because of corporate debt. They're borrowing money literally just to put it in to buy their own stock. And at the end of the day, while the company is buying the stock, the executives in the company are selling. So they're literally transferring that over. It's a huge racket. I wish you guys really understood how this worked. And that's what I try to do with these videos, right? To show you guys how these dots all connect so you guys can make educated decisions for yourselves, as we are not trading advisors, for educational purposes only. So other than that, the UK economy is looking to have narrowly escaped the recession in the run-up due to the deadline to leaving EU this month. The pace of growth has fell as exporters feel the impact of the slowing global economy, according to government stats. In corporate news, the UAW, the United Automotive Workers Union against GM, are worsening. They've been weeks and weeks and weeks after not being able to make a deal. It looks like GM has already had a cost of about $1 billion and lost production of about 118,000 vehicles through October 2nd. In technology, the UK has the world's largest offshore wind market. In 2018, it generated 8 gigawatts of capacity. It's a third more than the next biggest market, which is Germany, and a 20-fold increase since the last 10 years, even though China is expected to be bigger than both of them combined within the next 10 years. U.S. wants to outflank China's Huawei by pushing business towards European rival, mostly Nokia and Ericsson. Essentially, what they're recommending is that they give them financing, which are very beneficial to the Huawei's offer, because Huawei, the Chinese second largest smartphone manufacturer in the world, one of the largest telecommunications manufacturers in the world, their offers are generally a lot lower than most people. So Trump wants to offer beneficial financing to Ericsson and Nokia to bring that down on par to Huawei and have it cost the same so everybody can choose them instead of Huawei. Boeing and Porsche are announcing teaming up to develop electric vehicle that can fly. They haven't disclosed terms of who's going to finance what or pay for what, but they just announced it. In investment news, India is the 4th largest automaker in the world and has a vast electric automobile potential. The only thing is that of about 150 million drivers, imagine the potential of that. They have over 1 billion people, if I remember right, 1.3 billion people, and only 150 million have cars. So imagine when the middle class rises and they have, let's say, 500 million drivers on the road. But out of the 150 million drivers, only 8,000 actually want electric cars, and that's partially due to the affordability and also issues involving the charging of the batteries. The infrastructure isn't really set up yet in India. Essentially, what this means is that even though everybody's talking about the future being electric cars, this might not come as fast as everybody thinks it's going to because the infrastructure just isn't there. Singapore is replacing the U.S. in the top spot for the World Economic Forum's annual competitive. Let me start that over. Singapore replaces the United States as the top spot in the World Economic Forum's annual competitiveness report. It looks at a lot of different things, but mostly they edged out the United States due to the macroeconomic stability, infrastructure, labor market, and also the innovation tongue twister. Other than that, firms have added about 500,000 manufacturing jobs since Trump took office in January 2017. The Hong Kong Exchange is dropping its bid to acquire the London Stock Exchange. It would have created the 3rd largest exchange operator in the world. It was a $37 billion bid. And obviously, that would have been just behind the biggest, which is New York Stock Exchange, and the second biggest, which is NASDAQ. The IMF is stating that the growing divide between successful and lagging regions, the world's developed nations, is largely driven by automation and productivity trends, not global trade. And international events, Trump on Monday threatened to totally destroy and obliterate the Turkish economy due to the fact that they're considering an invasion of the Kurds, which Trump says if they do something that he considers quote unquote off limits, they're going to go after the economy of Turkey. So you guys know what's happening here. The U.S. asked for help in the Middle East. The Kurds, the group called the Kurds, helped the United States defeat ISIS. There's a lot of prisons even. The Kurds are saying that they're going to release all the ISIS prisoners if the Turkish do invade. And essentially, if you guys remember a few months ago, sometime last year, the Kurds wanted to have an independence movement. So their region goes from parts of Turkey to Iraq, and now the Turks want to invade them and attack them due to this whole independence thing. So it's a big problem that probably is not going to get resolved quickly. But essentially, the Turkish now are going after the Kurds, which helped the United States and defeat ISIS. And some people are saying that we literally abandoned the Kurds, which that's probably true. So we'll see how that works out. Germany is warning a repeat of the chaotic influx of migrants that the EU entered the EU unprepared. Let me repeat that. Okay, I'm going in circles now. Germany is warning a repeat of the chaotic influx of migrants that happened to the EU that left them unprepared in 2015. They're seeing a large influx of migrants between Greece and Cyprus and becoming alarmed. There's a lot of migrants that are in Turkey, and Turkey even said that if the EU talks bad or says anything bad about what the Turks are doing with the invasion in Syria, the Kurds, that they're going to release all those migrants to let them go to the EU. And in unusual facts this week, the ruins that are 5,000 years old, uncovered in northern Israel. It was announced on last Sunday. They're stating that there was the biggest city, up to about 6,000 people, which is a lot during that time, during the Bronze Age, which is 3,300 to 1,200 BC, before Christ. And even further excavations found that even 2,000 years before that, there was another village that was actually there, which is pretty impressive because that would have been one of the biggest cities in that age. So that was that. In the U.S., there's been a 12-year record for illegal immigrant crossings. The U.S. Border Patrol reportedly apprehended 851,000 people in fiscal 2009, which goes from October 1st to September 30th, not January 1st. The fiscal year is different for the U.S. They closed last week with just 40,000 arrests in September, which is a massive drop from 132,000 arrests made in May. And in South China, very large pigs are heavy as some polar bears are being raised. 500 kilos, or about just over 1,100 pounds are being herded. When they sell these in the market, they would sell for well over $1,400, more than 3 times the average of the monthly disposable income in that part of China. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.